so you form the Bible. Luke, she's up here. She's over here.
Okay, I'm Chris. I saw your picture today.
Yeah, I was like, what do you rotate?
Well,
It looked out there for a long
Yeah, I
time.
would have lifted my chin if I would know we're going to.
all right, is everybody ready? We're going to start whether you're ready or not. Who grew up hearing that the word Easter is not in the Bible? Who grew up hearing that the word Easter is not in the Bible? Does that mean the rest of you heard that it was in the Bible?
No, I've never heard that.
It was a mistranslation.
I missed that one.
Did anyone grow up hearing that the word Easter is in the Bible?
Yes.
You heard it?
Yes. I can't remember how.
Does anyone have a King James version of the Bible? 1611 version?
Yeah.
Or either the 21st century 1994 King James version? You got 94?
That's probably what I have.
Does anyone have 1611? We don't use 1611 anymore, do we?
No, don't use King James.
We're raised on that. Most of the verses I've memorized from 1611.
That's the one Paul used.
What do you got? 1994 King James?
Paul used.
All right, go to Acts 12, verse 4.
Acts
12:4,
okay.
and read it.
And when he had apprehended him, he put him in prison and delivered him to 4 quartermillions of soldiers to keep him, intending after Easter to bring him forth to the people.
Did you hear that? Easter, the word Easter. The original word is Pascha, and it means Passover. But for some reason, King James, the 1611 and 1994 versions do use the word Easter. That's not the only places the King James has mistranslated, but that is one of them. So, just a little Bible trivia. But I have a David Lehman riddle for you. I have 6 eggs, I broke 2, I cooked 2, and I ate 2. How many eggs are left?
4.
All right, y'all did good. What, Connie?
Of course, you could have dropped 2 on the floor.
I have 6 eggs, I broke 2, I cooked 2, and I ate 2. How many are left?
Oh, okay.
Okay. Answer's 4. Because the 2 you broke and the 2 you cooked, you ate, right?
Hopefully.
Oh, well.
You just only did 2 eggs.
I only did 2 eggs. Yeah, I scrambled. All right, go to the next slide. Again, just in case you miss a week and you need handouts, they are posted online up through today. Today's lesson is online. And you go to DestinCFC.com, click on a study of James, and they are all right there, including the previous weeks. Also, if you have a question during the week or comment, feel free to email me, and I'll try to get back with you either email or if it's good, if it's needing a phone call, I'll call you back. So today we're in James 3, verses 13 through 18. The title of this section is Heavenly Wisdom versus Worldly Wisdom. Who would like to volunteer to read verses 13 through 18 to get us started?
Who's wise and understanding among you? Let them show it by their good life, by deeds done in the humility that comes from wisdom. But if you harbor bitterness, envy, and selfish ambition up in your hearts, do not boast about it or deny the truth. Such wisdom does not come down from heaven, but it is earthly, unspiritual, demonic. For where you have envy and selfish ambition, There you find disorder in every evil practice. But the wisdom that comes from heaven is first of all pure, then peace-loving, considerate, submissive, full of mercy and good fruit, impartial and sincere. Peacemakers who sow in peace will a harvest of righteousness.
Okay, thanks, Deborah. So as we go through the notes, there are some built-in questions you'll see, and I will take some breaks kind of over different sections. So if you have a comment or question, just get my attention and we'll stop and talk about it. So the word that is used for wisdom in verse 13 literally means skill. It is used in the Bible often to describe people who are skilled in working with their hands. God gives you wisdom not so you can show others how much you know, but so you can show others how to live otherwise. So where do we find this wisdom? God's will and wisdom is found in His Word, just as Gary was talking about this morning. That is why getting into God's Word daily is so important to making wise decisions. If we're going to live life God's way, we need to know what that way is and apply it to our everyday lives. So, what did Solomon do to get it? Based on 2 Chronicles 1, 7 through 12.
Talk to God in a vision, I guess.
All right, we got one talk to God in a vision. Anybody else have a... He asked, yeah. According to 2 Chronicles, he asked for the wisdom. Huh?
Instead of riches.
Yes,
Anything else.
yes, right. He asked for wisdom first. So what do we need to do to get wisdom? Solomon asked for wisdom first and then knowledge, because wisdom is the ability to take the knowledge that we gain and use that knowledge to make wise decisions. Knowledge alone is not enough to make wise decisions. Wisdom is knowing there's a difference between knowledge and wisdom. We talked about in lesson 2, when we are going through trials, the reason we need wisdom over strength, grace, or deliverance is so we will not waste the opportunities God has given us to mature. Wisdom helps us understand how to use these circumstances for our good and God's glory. Wisdom was an important thing to Jewish people, and they realized that it was not enough to have knowledge. They had to have wisdom to be able to use that knowledge correctly. Any questions or comments so far? So James continues to exhort the people in the assembly who wanted to be teachers of the word. We talked about that last week. Telling them it is not enough simply to stand before the people and say words. You must have something to say. This is where spiritual wisdom comes in. Knowledge enables us to take things apart, but wisdom enables us to put things together and relate God's truths to daily life. Practical Christian living focuses on action instead of knowledge, doing instead of hearing. James begins this section asking a rhetorical question. What is wise and understanding among you? By asking a rhetorical question, he makes the people consider whether they are in this category or not. People are forced to consider his message instead of just thinking he is talking to someone else. So verse 13, how does a person demonstrate wisdom and understanding? A good life. Anybody else have something different wording? From verse 13. NIV says, by his works done in humility, doesn't it? Okay. So explain the phrase humility from wisdom. And New American Standard says gentleness of wisdom. King James and English Standard uses meekness of wisdom. What does that phrase refer to?
Meekness is a recognition of our need for God in our life.
Okay.
And this, if you recognize that, then God in your life also grants you wisdom.
Okay. Any other comments?
Maybe as God gives us wisdom, that we need to express those wise thoughts with humility as opposed to pride.
Okay. Don't just because we know it don't mean we need to be prideful about it and boasting. We're going to talk about that a little bit more here in a minute. Anybody else? Humility and meekness is the right use of power, and wisdom is the right use of knowledge. They go together. The truly wise person will show in his daily life that he is a child of God. Attitude and action go together. Also, we can put it this way, conversation equals behavior, and we must also not only talk the talk, but walk the walk. Many believe, I hear a train? Yeah. Okay. Not a tornado, though, right? Say tornadoes sound like trains. So. Many believe they will never be judged or held accountable for their decisions. Whatever makes you happy, do it. This is a selfish mentality that has been spread by Satan from the beginning. It sounds good or reasonable on the surface, but is rotten to the core. Christians believe we will be judged for how we live our lives. Right is not about what is pleasant for us, but about what pleases God. We are commanded to be unselfish and to put others first. Question? Y'all are a quiet bunch. We'll get interested. Maybe we'll get interested here in a minute. So verse 14, James begins describing earthly/worldly wisdom by giving a test by which we can measure if we are wise or not. We can look at our actions to see if we are living wisely. He starts off in verse 14 with the word envy. What's another word we could use for envy?
Jealousy.
Jealousy, or jealous. This word carries the meaning of selfish ambition and zeal. The wisdom of the world says, promote yourself, the squeaky wheel gets the grease. So, how do we feel when others succeed? Do we rejoice, or do we have secret envy and criticism? Do we feel burdened when others fail, or are we glad? When the wisdom of the world gets into the church, there's a great deal of fleshly promotion and human glorification. Comments on envy or jealousy?
I think everyone struggles with that at times. Maybe not at this time in their life, but that's the way we're made, and it's so difficult sometimes.
What?
To not be envious of
Not
someone,
to be envious.
especially like in a job situation where you did the work, but they got the credit.
Yeah.
That's just an example.
Yeah.
Envy sometimes, Lynn, can push you to do something that you wouldn't do if you didn't have some desire to have something else.
It may motivate you.
Motivate you.
Yeah. We'll do that.
I always consider envy that it is wanting what you have and wishing that you didn't have it.
Yeah.
Now, there have been times that I wish that I had something just like you.
Yeah.
But I don't want bad things to happen to you.
Right.
Or something good that comes in your life.
Could we relate it to the 10th commandment? Everybody remember what the 10th commandment is? They're going down the list. 10th commandment is do not covet, right? And what is covet?
Envy.
Envy, wanting something someone else has. You can parallel that with you got it, I don't. I'd like to have it. I don't necessarily want yours, but I want one like it, maybe.
Well, I think of that as wishing you didn't have it. You don't deserve it.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's like Rhonda was saying. Yeah. That comes from that statement: the greasy wheel gets the squeaky wheel gets the grease. Right?
Well, now, that has to do with dealing with the government.
No,
If you don't squeak, you don't get anything.
not necessarily. I've been in corporate. I worked in corporate world, and I worked there too. So. Anybody else? Envy or jealousy? Second one in verse 14 is strife. The spirit of self-seeking only creates rivalry and division in the church. I'm giving you a scripture reference, Philippians 2:3. You can look at it later. The next one is boasting. Pride loves to boast, and nothing is prouder than the wisdom of men. We shouldn't include ourselves in the same class as those who write their own testimonials. When God's wisdom is at work, there is a sense of humility and submission, and you want God to get all the glory. And the final one is deceit. The sequence is not difficult to understand. First, there's selfish ambition that leads to rivalry, followed by boasting, and boasting usually involves lies. A man's life is not read in his press releases, but by the Lord in his heart. So in verse 14, what is the meaning of the phrase, do not boast or do not be arrogant about it and deny the truth? In other words, do not boast about it and deny the truth, or deny the truth. What does verse 14 say about that? We've sort of touched on it already. Yes, ma'am.
I don't have an answer.
Oh.
I always think that, I think it's weird. It's talking about bitter envy and selfish ambition. I don't think I've ever boasted, oh, I'm envious. But he's saying it. If you have it, don't boast about it. So
Yeah.
I'd like to have that explained.
I knew someone would probably ask that question.
Good, then that means you're prepared, right?
No, that does not mean that. But I did kind of expect that, because I kind of asked myself that as I was going through this. Only way I can see it and feel, and I want anybody to jump in. If we're envious of someone, we don't go around telling them or someone else, say, I'm envious of Joe. I wish I had what Joe has. Or like Rhonda was saying, Joe don't deserve that promotion. I did such and such. I deserve that promotion. That's how I looked at it. I could be completely wrong. So, how's that sound, Marie?
Lynn,
Anybody else?
when I was a little boy, I used to have a T-shirt that was inscribed, "It's hard to be humble when you're as great as I am."
Yeah.
I'm still trying to get over that.
Yeah. There's a country song that's similar to that, isn't it?
So maybe it means sort of like, if I'm feeling that way, I'm even thinking also about what Bernard had talked about sacrificing the need to be special.
Yeah.
I wrote that down because that's something I need to sacrifice. But so maybe the boasting is sort of like, oh, I'm going to build myself up more to like make up for feeling that way. I don't know.
Yeah.
I'm wondering if it just means if you're feeling envious or selfishly ambitious to shut your mouth.
Yeah. That's always a wise thing to do. Anybody else?
We get quiet now.
Do what, Wayne?
He said it's gonna get quiet.
Oh. No, I like these deep thought questions.
Sometimes it's easy to look at the contrast in verse 17. And that helps.
Yeah. Yeah, we're going to get to that group in just a minute. So, yes, sir.
I can see where this is a big problem, especially with athletes.
Yeah.
Because they have big egos, they think they're all that plus more.
And people put them on a pedestal to start with.
Yes, because they have grown up, since whenever they started playing, whatever sport they're playing, they were telling them that they're so good, and it would be a hard thing for an individual such as that to not look down on someone else because they don't have the ability or the talent to do that.
Yeah.
And going through school, I play sports and all that kind of stuff, so that's why I'm using that analogy. And there have been times that I have seen that there was this one guy on the team. I mean, he was a big guy, and he did some things I didn't do. But there was things that I did that he couldn't do. And it was always this competition between the two of us. And, you kind of look at him and I'm trying to think back, was it not I was envious of him because of his ability. And we should look at those things our lives now that I've gotten older and understand more, that we should take those things and use them as motivation to do better
Yeah.
for the Lord.
Right.
Because now we can rechannel that energy
Yeah.
instead of for myself, but how I can use it to help someone else.
Yeah.
And use those energies to promote God's kingdom.
Yeah. Turn that energy into good versus bad.
Exactly.
Yeah. Good point. The answer to the question.
Christy had a comment.
Oh, I'm sorry, Christy.
This may not go exactly along with what Bernard said, but each person on the team brings something. So you work as a team.
Yeah.
You have different talents, and it all works together.
Yeah.
For the good of those that love the Lord, calls the service.
How many gifts come from God? So it might help us not to be noticeable if we remember it.
Yeah. But what's the phrase? There's no I in team. Yeah. Yeah. That's how the team's supposed to work. But we know sometimes that's not always correct.
So then we're
Kevin, right?
I remember. So we've been, Bree and I have been enthralled with the Tour de France, which concludes today. I don't realize very many people watch that bicycling, but there's a man on there that has tied the most stage wins in the Tour de France, which means they win an individual race. I think it's 34 which is about to be broken, could be broken today. He can break that record, which is just amazing. The first thing he does, though, after he wins, is he seeks out his teammates that got him there, because you don't win these races without a team now.
Yeah.
It's not individual anymore. They have
They use each other to draft and
right?
all that stuff.
They
Yeah.
use the members to lead out on these sprints to the
Yeah.
end,
Yeah.
to let the person who is favored on the team to win it. And so he's the favored one. He gets all the glory from the media,
Yeah.
from the attention. But as soon as the race is over, he seeks out all those team members in tears, hugging them,
Yeah.
talking to the media about them and their efforts that allowed him to be a winner, that it would not be possible otherwise.
Yeah.
And it's very moving, it's very compelling, because the humility
Yeah.
that is given, he realized he would not be there except for them. And so are we. We aren't where we are because of what we've done, because of our intellect. Whether you have a lot of money or a lot of speaking ability, or as Tom Christie said, we all bring something to the table, and that's what the Bible says.
Yeah.
It says we're all, foot can't say to the mouth, I'm better than you, or vice versa. We all bring something. We're all equally important. Even those that are less important are vital.
Yeah, very much.
So I think that perspective should help us to not be so boastful on what we are, and not seek that for, I guess, self-esteem, but rather, again, go back to the Lord.
Yeah. And it's those people working in the background you don't always hear about. And sometimes they don't want to. They don't want that recognition. They want to be in the background. So, yeah.
And they give up, like they lose their points and everything in the whole race because of what they're doing for the guy.
Oh, yeah,
Leading them
yeah,
out, then they end up at the very back, like
Yeah.
the lowest number of 140 people.
Yeah.
So that would not make you feel real boastful, but then he's building them up.
Yeah. Yeah.
That's that sacrifice.
Yes, yes.
I've heard football running backs, they have a real good game, they take that offensive line out for supper, dinner as you northerners call it, but supper down here. But, because they appreciate it, they know they couldn't have made it without that offensive line, so. Anything else? Anybody else have anything? So verse 15, what is the origin of man's wisdom?
The devil.
Yeah, devil. Wisdom does not come down from heaven, but it's earthly, unspiritual, and demonic. The believer has three enemies: the world, the flesh, and the devil. That's in Ephesians 2. These enemies are suggested by the terms earthly, sensual, devilish, and again, depends on your translation, it may say earthly, unspiritual, or demonic. Do not confuse the world's knowledge and the world's wisdom. Certainly there's a great deal of knowledge in this world, but we all benefit from it, but there is not much wisdom. Because, let me stop there. That statement kind of, this is not original with me. I found it and I used it. There's a great deal of knowledge in this world and we all benefit from it, but there's not much wisdom. Anybody want to comment on that? Keep politics out of it, please. It just kind of jumped out at me, and I wanted to include it. See if you had any feedback on that.
Think about how much knowledge has changed in the last 100 years and how little God is included in our lives in the last 100 years. Especially in public.
We've gotten book smart, but we're losing that, as someone put it, common sense sometimes. We used to say in Alabama, horse sense.
So in verse 17, it says the wisdom that comes from heaven, and it goes on to describe that.
Yeah.
I mean, even the Bible, think of how many, evil people quote the Bible too.
Oh, yeah.
There have been serial killers who
Yeah.
really believed they were, so the knowledge in the Bible, the wisdom in the Bible, it only becomes wisdom, I think, if we combine it with the humility and following God.
Well, the stuff that's in 17, we'll get to in a minute. But without the knowledge, all that other just goes away. They're not any good. So. Because the world has turned from God, it has lost its wisdom. Every increase in man's knowledge only magnifies the problems. We get that from Proverbs and Romans. This false wisdom has another source. It is unspiritual, sensual, or natural. The idea is that of man's fallen nature as opposed to the new nature given by God. There's a wisdom that gets its origin in man's nature totally apart from the Spirit of God. But this wisdom that is from beneath is also demonic or devilish. Beginning with Genesis 3, when Satan successfully deceived Eve and continuing through the entire Bible, there is a wisdom of Satan at work, fighting against the wisdom of God. Satan is cunning and has wisdom that will confuse you if you do not know the wisdom of God. What attitudes reflect a wisdom that is earthly, unspiritual, and demonic? I'm sorry, that's a question. Verses 15 and 16. What attitudes reflect a wisdom that is earthly, unspiritual, and demonic?
One that's based on selfish ambition.
Yep. Selfish ambition and bitter jealousy all comes from there. So true wisdom comes from above, but the false wisdom comes from below. In other words, there's a heavenly wisdom that comes from God, and there's a man-made wisdom that does not come from God. Whatever does not come from God is destined to fail, no matter how successful it may seem at the time. The wisdom from above, God's wisdom, originates from radically different sources and operate in opposite ways from the wisdom that is earthly, unspiritual, and demonic. Any questions or comments about that? So what attitudes reflect the wisdom from above? Verse 17. We've touched on them kind of around and about way. Okay, he puts it this way. A person that is pure, peace-loving, gentle, warm-hearted, full of mercy and good fruit, without favoritism, and sincere, is sincere, has wisdom from above. And we're going to break that down in just a second. Well, half a second. Even though verse 17 lists the evidences of true spiritual or heavenly wisdom, the first evidence actually comes from verse 13. And what was that first evidence? Or what is that first evidence? We talked about it at the very beginning. Humility and meekness, they're similar words. The Greek word was used for a horse that had been broken so that his power was under control. Meekness is not weakness, but power under control. The meek person does not selfishly assert himself or cater to the praises of men. The meek person seeks only the glory of God. And where does meekness come from? You were at home group Thursday night, we talked about this. I warned you we'd be talking about this. And Gary touched on it this morning, actually. If you listen real close. About the fruit of the Spirit. If I agree with that, Galatians 5:23. Cannot be manufactured by God. So the next one is, and then the first one in verse 17, is purity. God is holy, therefore the wisdom from above is pure. The ideal behind this word is chaste or free from defilement. James uses it again in James 4:8. There's a spiritual purity that results in a chaste relationship with the Lord. That's in 2 Corinthians 11:3. The next one is peace, or peace-loving. God's wisdom leads to a peace based on holiness, not on compromise. If the church is pure, devoted to God, then there will be peace. The church can never have peace by sweeping sins under the rug and pretending they are not there. Man's wisdom says, cover up sin, keep things together. God's wisdom says, confess sin and my peace will keep things together. Any questions or comments on meekness, purity, or peace? Gentleness, or considerate. Some translations actually use the word considerate. The gentle person does not deliberately cause fights, but neither does he compromise the truth in order to keep peace. What is an example of compromising the truth to keep peace?
Allowing people to eat donuts, maybe?
Donuts. Margaret?
Maybe going along with what the crowd's opinion is, even though you know that's wrong, and not saying something about it.
That's a good example. Yeah. Anybody else have another example? I guess everybody liked yours. I liked it too. But yeah, that's a very good example. The next one is compliance or submission, or being submissive. God's wisdom makes the believer agreeable and easy to live with and work with. The compliant person is willing to hear all sides of a question, but he does not compromise his own convictions. He can disagree without being disagreeable. Many people think that stubbornness is conviction, and they must have their own way. When God's wisdom is at work, there's a willingness to listen, think, pray, and obey whatever God reveals. Mercy, or full of mercy. The person who follows God's wisdom is controlled by mercy. God, in His grace, gives us what we do not deserve, and in His mercy, He does not give us what we do deserve. Anybody get that?
Yes.
God, in His grace, gives us what we do not deserve, and in His mercy, He does not give us what we do deserve. That's powerful. Good fruits. Faithful people are fruitful. God's wisdom does not make a life empty, it makes it full. The Spirit produces fruit to the glory of God. God's wisdom is practical, it changes the life, and produces good works to the glory of God. Decisiveness or impartiality. The word suggests singleness of mind and is the opposite of wavering, from James 1:6. When we have God's wisdom, we need not waver. You can be decisive and not be afraid. Wisdom from above brings strength from above. And finally, sincerity. The Greek word translated hypocrite in our New Testament means one who wears a mask or an actor. When God's wisdom is at work, there's openness and honesty, speaking the truth in love, Ephesians 4:15. Wherever you find God's people pretending and hiding, you can be sure the wisdom of this world is governing their ministry. Questions or comments on verse 17? That's almost the same as the fruit of the Spirit, isn't it? Very similar.
I might have missed it. Did you talk about impartial? I have an older NIV.
Yeah, I call it decisiveness,
Oh.
but I said impartial or impartiality. Yeah, different translations call it different things. But yeah, I did talk about it.
Well, then I think it says it's time to get political correct out.
Correct. I agree,
And godly
yes.
correct in.
Yep. Political correctness is in the church and it's tearing us apart. I mean, church as a whole. So, yeah. Church with a little c. I could actually bring it down, but then that'd get confusing. Could call it Catholic Church with a little c. That would really confuse some people. Janice knows what I'm talking about. So God's wisdom produces blessings. In verse 18, James returns to the word fruit. There's a vast difference between man-made results and God-given fruit. Fruit is a product of life, and fruit has in it the seeds for more fruit. Usually is the seed that is sown, but here the fruit is sown. As we share the fruit of God with others, they are fed and satisfied, and they in turn bear fruit. Have you ever heard the statement, man can count the seeds in an apple, but only God can count the apples in the seed? Yeah. Have I heard that before? So this is what this is talking about. We don't know how many apples is going to come out of seed, but God does. That's a T-shirt, John. So what we are, what we are is what we live. What we live is what we sow, and what we sow determines what we reap. If we live in God's wisdom, we sow righteousness and peace, and we reap God's blessing. If we live in man's worldly wisdom, we sow sin and war, and we reap confusion and every evil work. There are only two types of decisions we can make. From a human perspective, we would call them either good decisions or bad decisions. From God's perspective, we would call them wise decisions, either wise decisions or foolish decisions. The challenge we all face every day is confronting the things in life we can change and making the right decisions about those changes. Life really comes down to making decisions. You are who you are today, what you are today, and where you are today because of the decisions you have made in the past. Just as every parent wants to train their children to make wise decisions, God wants His children making wise decisions. The first step to having the wisdom you need to make wise decisions is to admit you need that wisdom. So often the reason why we make bad decisions is because we stubbornly refuse to admit that we need to ask for advice, both from God who gives wisdom and from others who are wiser than we are. God doesn't give wisdom to the people who think they know it all. He only gives it to the person who admits he doesn't know enough. Our problem is we have enough knowledge to make foolish decisions, but we don't have enough wisdom oftentimes to make wise decisions. Therefore, if we're going to make good decisions, we need to admit that we need wisdom. One of the marks of wisdom is being wise enough to realize that knowledge alone is not enough to make wise decisions. As I said on page 1, wisdom is knowing there is a difference between knowledge and wisdom. Knowledge is knowing a tomato is a fruit. Wisdom is not putting it in a fruit salad.
Another T-shirt.
Huh?
Another T-shirt.
Another T-shirt. I need to copyright some of these phrases.
That's really good.
To the end, I do end with two statements. One from James Barrett, who is Bernard and Joe Man know who James Barrett is. Wisdom is seeing life through the eyes of God and living life in the will of God. But Proverbs 4:7, in my opinion, sums it all up. Wisdom is the principal thing, therefore get wisdom. Any questions? Comments? Margaret?
Well, as we get older and wiser and have more knowledge. Maybe that's the reason it takes me forever to make a decision.
You got all this junk moving around in the brain, you're trying to figure it out. Yeah.
The older we get, the harder it is.
They say you get to a point where your brain is full, so to remember something new, you have to throw something away. You ever heard that? Anybody else have anything?
You know, it seems like sometimes, I mean, I don't know if anybody ever experiences this, but sometimes it feels like other people don't know what they're talking about.
Yeah. Don't call him names.
Sometimes I feel like I shouldn't be praying for wisdom, I should be praying for other people.
Yeah. Yeah. Yes, sir.
I do like your next to last comment from Mr. Merritt. I don't know who that is, but I do think sometimes wisdom can sound, especially in the book of Proverbs and James, it can almost sound kind of mechanical. It's like stuff you go get, you acquire it, you kind of put it in your tool chest and you just carry it around. But it really is relational, I think, in the biblical, in the bigger picture.
Yeah.
That's what that comment drives at. That,
Yeah.
Wisdom is really relational for the Christian. It's about God's will, and therefore it's not just that, you don't want that mechanical kind of just notion of it. It's something that's really based in God.
Yeah. Good point. Just quickly, James Merritt is a Baptist preacher north of Atlanta. He has a Sunday morning TV show. We usually have it on while we're getting ready, and this came from him. John?
I was just gonna say, it kind of correlated what he was saying, we don't, as much as we would like to, we don't live in a black and white world. There are gray areas.
Yeah.
And the word relational.
Yeah.
We still have to work out our own faith with fear and trembling. Like I say, get more and more knowledge about things, and you're still confused about what's the right direction.
Yeah, exactly. Anything else? Kevin?
An old quote from Will Rogers. You know who Will Rogers is?
I remember I know who he was, yeah.
I barely remember.
Yeah.
Said it's not the things in the Bible that I don't understand that bother me, it's the things I do understand.
Yeah. Okay, next week we'll start in chapter 4, verses 1 through 12. The title of that section is How to End Wars. And I actually heard a preacher this morning talking about that, so I've got to go back and look at his sermon. Next week, because of Christmas in July, we will meet in the auditorium because this will be all decorated and set up for that. So we'll remind you next week, but just let you know next week we'll be in the auditorium, so you can celebrate Christmas in July afterwards. Yes, sir.
Just want to say, first time visiting back from vacation in 2 years, great service, great class.
Well, thank you. Thank you very much. I'll try not to be boastful about it. But thank you for your comments. Thanks.
Don't forget to sign up for the Christmas.
Yeah. Everyone have a great week. I think the rain is gone for today. Thanks, Dave.
You remember that?
Yeah.
Yeah, just say,
So is the Christmas in July a tradition?
we've done it.
Okay.